Hi, I'm here to talk to you today about long-form thesis-driven research papers. The paper that I'm thinking about specifically in making this video is a 1,600-page paper that comes at the, 1,600 word paper that comes at the end of a composition course. But the tips in this video are also helpful for other long-form thesis-driven writing. Not only for a composition course, but also for tasks that you might find in the end of a content course that has a research paper component. So one of the challenges of this kind of writing is that often when we see that big number on the prompt, 1,600 words, it feels like a big monolith, and it can be really intimidating to feel like we maybe can't fill 1,600 words, right? And so some students and some writers end up with a kind of block that comes from feeling like they need to produce 1,600 words all at once. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through breaking that down into the smaller components that go into a thesis-driven, argument-based research paper, so that you can see the parts instead of seeing the 1,600-word monolith. All right, so I'm going to do that by doodling on a whiteboard. So give me just a moment to get that set up here in Zoom. Okay, here we go. So we are looking at, as I said, 1,600 words. And when we are thinking about academic style, right? Double-spaced, 1-inch margins all around, or 2.5 centimeter margins all around. Times New Roman or Arial font in the 12-point size. That is about 250 words per page. Okay, so if we take 1,600 words and we divide by 250 words per page, we get to approximately, remember all these numbers are approximations just for planning purposes, we get to approximately 6.5 pages. Okay, so 6.5 pages still maybe feels like kind of a lot. But as I said, some of those things have already been allocated, right? Some of those things already, even before we start thinking about our content, we already know what some of those pages are going to be. So for most students in this situation, one page is going to be the reference list. And approximately half a page is going to be the kind of top matter, the stuff that goes at the top of the first page, right? Your heading and your title, whatever has been specified in the prompt that you need to put up there at the top of that first page. So those are some things. So already we can subtract 1.5 pages from the 6.5 page total, and we get to 5 pages. Okay, I hope this is starting to feel a little bit more manageable. Again, thinking about the specifications of academic format for font and style and all that other stuff. Usually a page is approximately 2 paragraphs. So keep in mind that this is just a general guideline. You might have a paragraph and a half, you might have 3 short paragraphs, but in general, for planning purposes, we can say that a page is approximately 2.5 paragraphs. So if we have 5 pages, that means we've got 10 paragraphs. Okay, so this is the resource that we have to spend, but there are still some requirements that we need to think about. So let me change colors with my pen here. So if we have 10 paragraphs, we know that argumentative thesis-driven essays have a three-part structure, right? They have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. So in the shorter form writing that you may have done, so for example, things like writing a 5-paragraph essay or an exam essay, or maybe even some of the 4-page kind of length essays that you may have written earlier in this class or for other classes. In general, you've probably written so that your introduction is 1 paragraph and your conclusion is 1 paragraph. But when we get into this longer form of 1,600 words or more, those sections of the paper, the introduction and the conclusion, they might grow a little bit. So you might have 2 paragraphs of introduction and you might have 2 paragraphs of conclusion. It's still a little variable though. So I'm going to go ahead and list here 1 to 2 paragraphs for introduction and 1 to 2 paragraphs for conclusion. So what does that leave us for the body of your essay? We can do some subtraction here again. So from 10, that leaves us with 8 to 6 paragraphs for the body of your essay. So 8 is still a pretty good number of paragraphs. 6 is starting to feel a little small, don't you think? So I want to amplify this section of the body because that's where you're really going to be making your argument. So let's think about what goes in the body section. So the body here is just not the introduction and not the conclusion. So after your thesis statement at the end of your introduction, you might have some background. And what goes in your background paragraph is really going to be highly dependent on the particular topic that you're talking about. This might be a little bit of history related to your topic. It might be a little bit of cultural context related to where you're talking about your topic. So if you're talking, for example, about abortion in the Russian Federation, then maybe there needs to be a little bit of context about Russian culture. If you're talking about the death penalty in the United States, then maybe there needs to be a little bit of cultural context about, particular laws or the way that the US criminal justice system works, right? So the particular information that you need to include in background is really going to depend on your topic. So as I said, this might be history. It might be cultural context. It might also be definition of terms. So maybe you are using a word in a specific way, or you are introducing a new concept that people might be unfamiliar with, right? So maybe you need to spend some time defining terms. But in a piece of writing of this length, approximately 1,600 words, we want to probably try to limit that background paragraph to just 1, right? So you're not being exhaustive here. You're only giving the most essential information so that your readers can understand what it is that you're going to argue in the main part of your essay. So if we give 1 paragraph over to background, that leaves us with 5 to 7 paragraphs for our argument. I don't know about you, but now that really feels like not very much at all. By the time I've dealt with all of this other stuff, I come down and I have just 5 to 7 paragraphs for the argument part. So how you allocate those 5 to 7 paragraphs is again going to depend on the kind of argument you want to make. But oftentimes, if you look back at the thesis statement you proposed, or you look back at your topic development activities, the argument that you're thinking about has multiple parts. I think what I see the most in student essays of this type is that the argument has maybe 2 parts or 3 parts. So now you have to decide, if I'm going to talk about 2 different things, or 3 different things, how am I going to spend my 5 to 7 paragraphs? So that's something, this is where you really need to do the thinking about what are the different parts of your argument and how are you going to balance them with each other, right? Are you going to, so let's say we have a 2-section, we decide that we're going to divide our argument into 2 big sections. If you've only got 5 paragraphs left, you're going to end up with 3 plus 2. If you have 6, maybe you have 3 plus 3, or maybe you have 4 plus 2. Maybe one piece of your argument is more important to you or more complicated and it needs more paragraphs. So then maybe it's 4 plus 2, right? That's 5 paragraphs. These are both 6 paragraphs. If you have 7 paragraphs and you want to divide your argument into 2 sections, you can go 3 plus 4, or you can go 5 plus 2. I don't know that I would go 6 plus 1. That seems like it's a little bit out of balance, but these are both ways that you could do 7. A similar thing, if you decide that your argument has 3 sections. Right? This again is, maybe going to be 2 plus 2 plus 1 if you've got 5, or 1 plus 1 plus 3. And if you have been shorter every place else and you have more paragraphs left for your argument, with 7, you could go 2 plus 2 plus 3. Or 3 plus 3 plus 1. So you can see the kind of thinking that I'm doing here is I'm thinking about how many sections does my argument have? And then how many paragraphs am I going to give to each of those sections? So let's say that you've been thinking about single-use plastics and their impact on the world. And maybe you want to talk about 3 different kinds of single-use plastics. Maybe you want to talk about in food service, like straws and cutlery. Maybe you want to talk about plastic bags, like we carry stuff home from the store. And then maybe you want to talk about medical issues. So 3 sections. So I would say that probably the simplest one to talk about is, straws and cutlery. So maybe I would give that just 1 paragraph. And then 3 paragraphs for talking about 3 paragraphs for talking about plastic bags, because those are a little bit complicated. And then medical stuff is also really complicated, right? Medical use of single-use plastics has a lot of factors that influence it. So maybe another 3 paragraphs there, right? Or maybe I want to give them a little bit more even treatment. So I go 2, 2, and 2, and then add more, add something more to my introduction or add something more to my conclusion. So as you are looking at the kind of blank screen in front of you, or you're looking at your draft, if you are feeling overwhelmed, think about what it is you want to say, right? What are the parts of your argument, and how are you going to divide up the space available to you in your paper to really express your argument the best that you can. I'm trying to bring this, there we go. Now you can see the whole thing that we have looked at today. So in a 1600 word paper, you have approximately 10 paragraphs to spend on your content. And those have to include your introduction and your conclusion, as well as the body where you make your argument. You might need to think about including some background, but keep it brief. And then you need to take a look at how many subsections does your argument have, and how are you going to allocate space to those subsections? Okay,